Oh. Okay.
Looks like I'm ready. Okay, I'd like to call to order the town of Fraser's special meeting for Wednesday, April 26th at 6:01. Please have the roll call.
Katie Fisher, Eileen Waldo,
Brian Zervinik.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Cornell Quinn.
Katie Souls.
Lewis Gregory.
And Paul Vandernail. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the meeting. There's a couple things going on here, the open forum and the public hearing. The open forum is where you would address the board on items not specific to the agenda tonight. And then the public hearing portion, keep your comments specifically to the item of that public hearing. So right after we do the approval agenda, we'll open up the open forum. So this is business that's not on the agenda. And this is where you'll come up, raise your hand, I'll address you. Come up to the podium, state your name, if you live in the town of Fraser or not. And you'll have 3 minutes. And we do have a timer going, so everybody should be able to see the timer. And we will be cutting you off at 3 minutes. No going back and forth, so come up and make sure you've got what you want to say out during your 3 minutes. And this is for both the open forum and the public portion part of this. Where was I? So be civil. We do have a civil code here for the town of Fraser. So be civil to everybody here. Be respectful to the board and other audience members. What am I forgetting?
You got it.
Okay. So if I can have a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. I'm sorry, the people online, so when we come to the open forum or the public hearing portion, in public comments, you can raise your hand digitally and we will unmute you, and then it's the same rules for you online as. So this is the open forum portion. So if anybody would like to address the board on items that are not on the agenda, now is your chance. We've got 3 minutes. So let's start here in the town hall. If anybody would like to. Okay, anybody online?
I have one.
Okay, we got one hand up.
Where'd she go? Oh, who was it?
Hi, this is Deborah Schulman. I just want to thank the Fraser Board of Trustees. I know this is taking a lot of your time and energy, and I just want to thank you for your service to the town. That was it.
Great, thank you, Deborah. And I do know that you're here in the town. But for future, if you could, people could just let us know if they live in the town of Fraser. Thank you, Deborah.
Okay.
Okay, we are now at public hearing and possible action, the outlines of which. So what we're going to do is we'll end up opening up the public hearing. We'll have the applicant's presentation. Then we'll have a staff report. And then we'll open it up to the public hearing, the public comments section of this. We have this scheduled for public comments between 7:15 and 9 o'clock. We will be, if we hit the 9 o'clock hour, we'll continue this meeting until a future meeting. We're not going to go past 9 o'clock tonight on that. So that's set in the agenda as well. And then if we move on, we'll end up closing the public comment section, and then it would happen. Board will ask any questions of our council or staff, and then it would be at the board's pleasure to take action or to continue or not. So I'd like to go ahead and open the public hearing for the First Amendment to amend and reinstated consolidated service plan for Byers View, West Mountain, West Meadows Metropolitan District. So first up will be the applicant's presentation.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Clark Lipscomb with Grand Park, for the record.
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees. Thank you. Nicole Takeoff with Spencer Thane on behalf of the applicant and the districts.
Next page.
Okay. Tonight, we are requesting for the Board of Trustees to approve the First Amendment to the first amended and restated consolidated service plan for Byers View, West Meadow, and West Mountain Metropolitan Districts. We are also requesting that the Board of Trustees approve a new service plan for West Mountain Metropolitan District and West Mountain Metropolitan District numbers 2 through 5, and a new service plan for Byers View Metropolitan District, GP North Meadow Metropolitan District, and GP South Meadow Metropolitan District. The 3 existing metropolitan districts were formed in 2005, following the Board of Trustees approval of the original service plan on August 4th, 2004. And then the Board of Trustees approved the first amended and restated service plan on April 14th, 2005. That first amended and restated service plan is the current service plan 3 metro districts are governed by as of today. Following the formation of the districts in 2005, it was anticipated that the property would be developed in the near future. However, the districts have experienced significant delays to development as a result of the economic downturn of the 2000 to 2009 financial crisis and subsequent economic conditions unfavorable to development. As a result, the only developed property within the entire project is the property within West Meadow Metropolitan District. And upon the petition of the sole property owner and following the public hearing, the undeveloped property was within West Meadow was excluded from West Meadow and subsequently included into Byers View on March 10, 2023. The current service plan that was approved in 2005 contains certain debt restrictions and deadlines with the expectation that the property would have been developed in the near future. However, as mentioned, almost 20 years later, a substantial portion of the project remains undeveloped. We are requesting through the service plan amendment and the new service plan to change those debt restrictions and extend the deadline to allow the project to be developed and the public infrastructure to be financed accordingly. This request is limited to the undeveloped property in the project only, and not to any property that is within the West Meadow Metropolitan District. The purpose of the first amendment to the existing service plan is to separate the undeveloped property currently within West Mountain and Byers View from the developed community existing within West Meadow. The undeveloped property will be governed by a new service plan that will accommodate the need for phased development and will address the delayed development status and increased construction costs that the project is currently facing. As a result, the West Mountain District would be divided into 5 metropolitan districts, and the undeveloped property in Byers View would be divided into 3 metropolitan districts. We are requesting 5 districts for the West Mountain property because we anticipate the development to largely proceed in 5 phases. Similarly, we anticipate the property within the proposed GP North Meadow districts to develop separately from the proposed GP South Metro District. Can you go back to?
Oh, I apologize.
The map on this slide depicts the boundaries of the districts up until somewhat recently. So it shows West Mountain Metropolitan District under the Union Pacific Railroad, that entire 1,000-acre project property. And the West Mountain and Byers View is just north of the Union Pacific Railroad. And fast forwarding, if you do one slide up, thank you. This map will shows what will be the boundaries of the new West Mountain districts if the service plan amendment and then the new service plan is approved. This is the same property that is currently within West Mountain, but it's divided into 5 separate metropolitan districts, all of which would be governed under the same service plan. This map is showing the current boundaries of West Meadow and Byers View Metropolitan District following the boundary adjustment that was done this last March. Basically, the West Meadow properties are the ones that are numbered, and then the hatched markings is the rest of the property that's currently within Byers View. That's one more. This map shows the current boundaries of West Meadow Metropolitan District in red. Regardless of the action taken tonight that we're requesting, the West Meadow boundaries will remain the same. The red is the property within West Meadow, and it will be staying in West Meadow. If the Board of Trustees decide to approve the first amendment and the new service plan for Byers View, GP North and GP South districts, the green, yellow, and purple areas are those new boundaries. The yellow area shown would be the Byers View district. The green would be the GP North Meadow, and the purple is the GP South Meadow. As I just stated, as I previously stated, the West Meadow Metropolitan District only consists of developed residential property, and then publicly owned and operated facilities. We're requesting that the board approve the first amendment to the service plan. If the board does approve the first amendment, the same terms and restrictions of the current service plan will continue to apply to West Meadow, except for the debt authorization will be decreased from 99 million to 24 million as it applies to West Meadow. The mill levy limitations will remain unchanged. That is 50 mils for debt service and 5 mils for operations and maintenance. And just to reiterate that West Meadow, the only change to West Meadow would be the debt limit is we put together this table. So it shows under the original service plan, the Byers View, West Mountain, and West Meadow districts are governed by that service plan. If the first amendment is approved, only West Meadow would remain under that service plan. Under the original service plan, all 3 districts have a 99 million debt limit that is combined for all 3 districts. Under the first amendment, the West Meadow would have a 24 million debt limit. The mill levy under the original service plan for all the districts is 55 mils. That will be the same for West Meadow under the new amendment. The debt issuance deadline for all 3 districts is December 31st, 2030 under the original service plan. It would remain the same for West Meadow. The debt maturity deadline under the original service plan for all 3 districts is December 31st, 2050. Again, that would stay the same for West Meadow. The public infrastructure that the districts are authorized to finance, construct, install is our sanitation, street and drainage, and water improvements and facilities. West Meadow would continue to be authorized to finance, construct those same improvements and facilities. If the board approves the first amendment, we are also requesting that the board approve the West Mountain, a new service plan for the West Mountain Metropolitan District and the West Mountain Metropolitan District numbers 2 through 5. As I mentioned before, this is the same property that's within the West Mountain District. It's approximately 1,019 acres of undeveloped property. The development will consist of primarily residential with limited commercial. With these districts, we are also requesting an added power to operate or to finance and construct and install parks, trails, and open space. The districts will be responsible for constructing the public improvements to serve this property. And upon completion, it is anticipated that the improvements will be dedicated to the town for ownership and maintenance. The town will fund the cost of operating and maintaining the improvements from the increased revenue the town will receive from the development, as well as any fees and charges the town decides to impose. This slide shows the anticipated cost estimates for the public infrastructure for the West Mountain project. As you'll see, there's sanitation, storm sewer, streets, water, and parks and recreation improvements that are currently anticipated, which are totaling about $170 million. Under the new service plan for the West Mountain districts, the maximum debt authorization will be $200 million that will be combined for all 5 districts. The maximum debt mill levy will be 50 mils. The maximum operation and maintenance mill levy will be 5 mils. The debt issuance deadline for these districts would be December 31st, 2048. The debt maturity deadline would be December 31st, 2088. These districts would also be limited to a 40-year debt term maturity that is required under Colorado state law. And the developer reimbursement agreement term limit in the service plan is limited to 20 years. On the right hand of the slide, you can see a calculation of what the impact would be for property that is within the district's boundaries. I can explain that if you guys need me to. And likewise, if the First Amendment is approved, we are also requesting a new service plan for Byers View, GP North Meadow, and GP South Meadow metropolitan districts. These districts would consist of 119 acres of undeveloped property, which would also primarily be residential and limited commercial. And we're also requesting limited park and recreation powers for these districts. This slide shows the cost estimate breakdown for the Byers View, GP North, and GP South Meadow metropolitan districts, sanitation, storm sewer, streets, and water improvements totaling approximately $61 million. And under the new service plan for these 3 districts, the debt limit would be $85 million combined. The maximum debt mill levy would be 50 mils. The maximum operations and maintenance mill levy would be 5 mils. The districts would be limited to a debt issuance deadline of December 31st, 2048, and a debt maturity deadline of December 31st, 2088. This mirrors the deadlines that are set forth in the service plan for West Mountain, and the developer reimbursement agreement term limit is 20 years. Under the new service plans and under the existing service plan as well, the districts are required to report a statement against the property within the district's boundaries that includes the notice of the district's existence, average expected tax levy, maximum expected tax levy, and the maximum allowed tax levy. The purpose of this is to provide potential homeowners, property owners of the knowledge of the district existence and applicable district information. In addition to that service plan requirement, the metropolitan districts are required to have other state law disclosure requirements. I have those listed here, but I can go through those if you'd like, but
Sorry.
The Colorado state statute, the Special District Act, includes the criteria that the governing jurisdiction must apply and consider when determining whether or not to approve a service plan. I've listed those 4 criteria here. The first one is there's sufficient existing and projected need for organized service in the area to be serviced by the proposed special district. The proposed public improvements are not available through the town, county, or other governmental entity within a reasonable time or on a comparable basis. To develop the area, significant investment is needed in public infrastructure. Financing and construction of the infrastructure through these districts will lower costs and ensure the costs are spread among those in the community that will benefit from such development. The second criteria is the existing service in the area to be served by the proposed special district is inadequate for present and projected needs. There are no other governmental entities in the vicinity that consider it feasible or practical to undertake the planning, design, acquisition, construction, installation, and financing of the public infrastructure needed to serve the property. Third, the proposed special district is capable of providing economical and sufficient service to the area within its boundaries. The districts will ensure the public improvements are constructed within a reasonable time for the benefit of the community, and the district's involvement will lower the cost of the public improvements. Fourth, the area to be included in the proposed special district has or will have the financial ability to discharge the proposed indebtedness on a reasonable basis. The districts will be limited to issuing debt within the confines of the service plan and limited to the amount the district can reasonably pay from the revenue derived from the debt service mill levy and other legally available revenue. The financial plans attached to the service plans, which the town staff and its consultants have reviewed, are examples of how the districts may finance the public improvements. Thank you for your time this evening, and I'll hand it over to Clark.
Can we go to slide 8?
Yes.
Page 8 of the PowerPoint? Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. I just want to point out that this map is not what we submitted originally with the service plan amendment we've been working on for a while. This map reflects what both the town requested and our existing residents requested to shrink the district, the current West Meadow district, to the area in red that's developed, effectively limiting the amount of debt to that, capping it, and in fact, that's why we're reducing this debt. So I wanted to point out to everybody that the original amendment was actually just to extend the terms, repaid at 2062. There were no mill levy increases. The mill levies all stayed the same. But out of that request that was really driven, I think, by the town and some of the residents, we developed this. Took a little while to get it developed, worked with the town. And what this does is give the existing homeowners within Grand Park and all the developed properties really a limited scope of debt associated with that public infrastructure. And that's the $24 million reduction. And then sets for the north and the south meadow to be completely independent of this, thereby creating some independence for the homeowners of the West Meadow Metropolitan District and effectively bifurcating these metro districts that are building this public infrastructure.
Can I ask a question?
No,
We will.
So the public will be able to address the board at the public comments section. So then that's when you raise your hand and. Thank you.
So anyway, I just want to point that out to everyone that this is reflective of what the town asked us to do. And that's the direction that we've gone with this. And as far as I know, given that we've had multiple board meetings since we undertook this to effectuate this boundary adjustment, many of our homeowners have been on those public hearings and there's been no comments. And I've not heard from anyone that's not happy with the outcome of where we're at.
So.
Maybe there's somebody. Sounds like one.
Better mute her. Should have.
We get asked questions now.
Yeah, so you can go to the question slide if you like, Antoinette.
Go back to the slide that was just up, please. And I just have a question on the white zone, which is all the existing open space. With the purple boundary, the thing, kind of the finger that sticks up on the east side, how does the end of that align with Rendezvous Road connection when that goes up? I personally have to try.
The Rendezvous Road connection being, it's called American Willow Drive.
Okay,
And that is all in the purple. It's at the very end of the red finger in the middle, Katie. And runs on the edge of that open space, straight out to the rec center, just as for references that red up by the highway.
yeah,
So the American Willow Drive and the Rendezvous connection is to the left of that red spot.
so. Okay, but within that.
The white areas,
That boundary.
the white areas on this map have zero planned development.
So that's quite a bit of the highway. It's like half of the distance between the rec center and the north. West Meadow. That's being put in the south, no. Yeah, the South Meadow.
Yeah, the South Meadow District boundaries are developed based on where we believe the public infrastructure will go, Eileen, being roads, water, sanitary sewer, storm. And what we know is there's nothing in that wide area. So there's no reason to have any taxing authority in those areas. There can be roads, water, and sewer in all of the rest of that purple area.
And then, it seems like the car wash is in the undeveloped area.
The car wash is in, will be in the west. Are you talking about the Winter Park Market gas station? Oh, okay, yeah.
I think
The whole,
is that,
yeah, Winter Park
that's the
Market.
rec center and then the road to the rec center.
Yep. So the Winter Park Market is in the South Meadow District, as are the other commercial buildings and all the future 1WA, 2W planning areas. All of that's in South Meadow.
Be useful if that was in a form that had what kind of an overlay
We had that.
of that, well, and the adjacent property. It's isolated, it doesn't show me where that lines up. And of course, we're still in litigation over the open space, and I have concerns about approving a boundary. And I don't know if we're allowed to do that or not with this, but approving that boundary of that portion of purple zone that reaches kind of far north.
Yeah, Katie, since you brought that up, I think it's important to point out that these district boundaries and the current district boundaries have nothing whatsoever to do with one of the pending litigation, the annexation agreement, or the open space requirements, et cetera. The current districts overlay everything on that in their entirety.
Okay.
Okay.
So does our attorney concur with that?
Yeah, I was actually going to address that, and
Okay.
I do agree with Clark on that point.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, these are taxing boundaries that
Okay.
you're being asked to approve or not approve.
Okay.
They have no bearing on what's being litigated, which is the interpretation of the annexation agreement and the obligations contained in the annexation agreement. Where that ultimately lands would have no bearing on what you decide tonight. There could be overlap. It could be in the white. It could be all the white and part of the blue. That's an open question, which, will be decided by the court or through settlement.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
for that clarification.
Any other questions? This is.
Yeah. I had a question. This is Lewis. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
go for it. You're next.
So I wonder if you could overlay the current infrastructure that's there in the red and where the roads are, because I'm not sure why you would want to put open space in the South Meadow Metro District. But currently, a lot of that purple is currently open space, right? It's meadow.
No.
Right? So where's the market? Where's the,
Pretty much everything in purple is not developed. Lewis,
where's the gas station in the market? Is that the far right little square?
now that's the purple rectangle that's surrounded by the red roads, which are owned by the town. Which everything in red stayed in the West Meadow District.
Leslie,
Right.
does our cursor show up on?
Not on the shared screen.
Yeah, we had this.
So I'm just wondering, Clark, why would you want to put all that open space in the purple or the South Meadow Metro District if it's not going to be developed?
Well, Lewis, we don't know where the edge of the development is for 1WA and 2W. Okay, we do not know. And until that's completely designed and approved, we won't know. So as I stated before, the current district overlays everything on this map in its entirety. It's really irrelevant. We've actually pared it back because we know absolutely for sure there's nothing going in these wide areas. That's absolutely for sure. In my world right now, what we don't know is how 1W and 2W will develop. And it's been made very clear in multiple public hearings and in the annexation agreement that there are the area necessary to develop the entitlements is what the area ultimately is. So we don't know exactly where that boundary will be. And it would not be good to not include the taxing district over areas that would include public water, roads, and sewer. So the existing one covers the whole thing, because when that was done, nobody knew what was going to happen. These, we know at a minimum that these wide areas are designated open space, private open space, but it's designated open space.
Well, I just think a lot of town residents have concerns about the meadow getting parsed up and developed. And I think it would be helpful to have an overlay of what's, you know, what's where. This is very conceptual. And I think people are concerned about boundaries of what's going where and what's going to be protected as open space slash conservation easement. I mean, I think that would be helpful for people to understand, you know, what's going where, what's planned.
Louis, I'm going to reiterate what the town lawyer explained, that these boundaries have nothing whatsoever to do with that. And what will ultimately be open space and what will ultimately be developed will be understood as processes or as developments are brought forth to the town when they're really designed. And the town, the residents, et cetera, hopefully will come and weigh in at those meetings so that we can hear feedback about those plans. But until we get to that point, this is what needs to happen.
Okay, I'll defer to other residents concerned, but I think this is really pretty simplistic and doesn't give the town and the residents a lot of answers at exactly what you have planned in the future.
And if I may also provide a response. So the property that is shown in green, white, purple, and yellow is currently within Byers View Metropolitan District. That district could choose to issue bonds tomorrow for that property and to develop that property. What we're requesting to do differently than have Byers View issue those bonds and finance and construct the infrastructure is to create 2 additional districts. That way that we can proceed with development in a phased fashion instead of all of that property being subject to financing the public infrastructure for that entire property and that entire project. That's what we're requesting tonight. As Clark mentioned, the development plans are not known, and the state statute doesn't require that the development plans be known for the service plan to be approved and the districts to be formed.
Well, and I'd like to add, Louis, in our original submission, we had a sketch plan. We have multiple sketch plans on this project since it's been in process for all these years. We had a sketch plan underneath this, and we're asked to produce this map by the town. Because somebody was confused that having the sketch plan development on the map would somehow constitute some sort of an approval of those sketch plans. So I'm kind of seem to be damned if I do and damned if I don't here. So I had exactly what you're asking for in our original submittal. And, you know, this is what we were asked to do last week. Okay. So I think key component being everything in here that's not red, including the white, is covered by a current district that has the same taxing ability for the same purposes. This creates a phase structure, bifurcates it, and takes those areas out of that we for sure will never have anything built in.
You mentioned 1W and 2W. But on my map, that seems like it's 23W.
Well, nobody knows where the boundary of 23W is today, by land.
No, but we know it goes to the highway.
And then parts of this does go to highway, but we don't know where the development boundary will be to the entitlement in 1W and 2W. We do not know that will be today.
You remember the meeting where they talked about the 2W, 1W in that water balloon? There are certain sizes that certain directions going, but they're malleable, so you can move the lines around. With roads and stuff, so this doesn't change any of that. This just changes what 1W, 2W, 20W, whatever it is. If it's in that purple area, then it's being taxed differently later than what the red area is. It doesn't change the density, correct?
Right.
Doesn't change your lodging,
Doesn't change any of the entitlements.
doesn't change your commercial, right? All that's the same.
It doesn't change anything in the annexation agreement and the processes that we undertake to go and develop. New neighborhoods and new commercial, whatever the case may be, the same exact process, which includes lots of public hearings, will be undertaken when we get to that stage.
But you're also saying it won't be open space.
No, I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm saying we don't know yet what it will be.
The state
You won't promise it's going to be open space.
I am not going to promise that we won't get hit by a meteor tomorrow and I'll be dead. I don't know. If I knew, then we would have it up there exactly. Okay, but I don't know.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah.
Comments?
On the map on page 7. It has partial A, partial B, and partial C. And it says they're identified on sheet 7. I don't know where sheet 7 is.
This was just for illustrative purposes, just to demonstrate what the current boundaries are for the Buyers View and West Meadow district. I did not include that. The rest of this, no, it's not, yeah, because it doesn't matter for the purposes of our request. This was just for your own application.
Oh, and then back to the map on 8 again. I'm glad to see Byers Peak identified as that spot because it's moved between that spot and the one to the left, back and forth. So what is the line indicating the previous Byers Peak?
Byers View. Yeah, those are pre-existing parcels, Eileen, that we purchased in 1999 when we bought those two parcels. And the one to the left was labeled Byers View in the 0405 district approvals. And today that actually has part of what was the Willows HUD apartment project that didn't get finally approved. That actually overlapped into that parcel. And where Byers View is now on the other parcel is next to the railroad underpass we completed. And there will not be anything there ever. So what you don't want to do is have kind of a project splitting the lines of a district. And so this cleans that up. Okay.
So Byers View will be its own district with its own board.
Right.
And North Meadow and South Meadow will both have a board. And so we'll go from potentially 2 boards. This 8 boards.
We'll have 4 here, GP North, Byers View, West Meadow, GP South,
Okay,
On that
and then 5 more.
and then
So
5
9.
on the West Mountain. Correct.
Buyer's View is gonna be split into more than one, no?
Buyer's
Well-
View, this splits Buyer's View into GP North, GP South. That's what this does. Buyer's View currently is everything that's not red
Right.
on that map. And so this changes Buyer's View to what's on this map.
Any other board questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'm, a little confused. My understanding was that 23W was designated as a conservation easement or open space or whatever. So where does that fit? Because it looks like the purple, which is going to be the South Meadow, is going to overlap the 23W open space. And maybe I'm stuck on that, but it would be it. I think it would be nice to overlay that on this map to understand where the boundaries are.
Well, the planning area boundaries on the PDD, which is that what you're referring to, Louis, the PDDP?
Yeah, I mean,
The 2005 PDDP, which is the subject of the litigation, but nonetheless, I'll address it. Reflects the planning area boundaries. Okay, the acreages that are on there are not hard and fast acreages. Okay, they're conceptual. They can move. What is hard and fast is the entitlements that were approved by the town. Okay, and 23W does not have a conservation easement over all of 23W. We clear that up right now. So 23W, in fact, was mostly open space corridors with golf on the West Mountain. And part of it was in the meadow on this map that's up on the screen. But nowhere is there a conservation easement over 23W. That's not required. That's not in the annexation agreement. It's nowhere in any documents. I've heard that repeatedly, and that's not accurate. So.
okay, well, that's sort of subject to the litigation, but understand the boundaries aren't necessarily exactly defined, but the acreage is. So the white area you have here, what is the acreage of that? And does that correspond with 23W?
Louis, I don't know what the acreage is in this wide area. I didn't break them down specifically. And again, it's irrelevant for the purposes of this exercise and the annexation agreement and the development plans that one day will be presented to the town. It does not matter for this purpose today.
And again, the statutory criteria lays out what the town is considering and whether or not there's a conservation easement, what is happening to that property is not among that criteria. So at this point, it doesn't apply.
Okay,
I have more.
okay.
On the SB 21-262, who is the governing body? And I think I know what it means, but I can think of several possibilities.
21-262,
Yeah.
the governing body would be this body for the districts, the Board of Trustees. So currently, all three districts do file an annual report with the town Board of Trustees. And that has been a requirement under the service plan since the districts were formed. The state legislature has made it a requirement for all districts moving forward that were formed from 2009.
And ours has been provided annually since this was formed in 2005 to the town, as well as public hearings had for those board meetings.
But in the statutes, we don't have any control. It went to the county. So it's really, I think something has to be straightened up in the statutes.
So the statute just it applies another requirement for metropolitan districts formed after 2000. The governing body, whether it be the town, the city, the county, can require additional requirements in the service plan for a metropolitan district. This board has already decided to do that back in 2004 and 2005. And the districts have been complying with that every year. And that requirement is in these new service plans as well. Because we were trying to keep the service plans very similar to what is currently in existence. So there's two requirements from the state statute and from the service plan that require the districts to file that annual report. It's just duplicative. But I put it in there, so just because there has been a lot of discussion about metropolitan districts and the disclosures that they have to follow recently in the last couple of years, and this just demonstrates that not only is that requirement in the service plan, it's also a state law requirement.
When we were dealing with the elections for the board of West Meadow, we were told we had nothing to do with it. It had to go through the county. And I'm just wanting to clear that up. And maybe we have to change it in the state statutes.
Because we're here, I'm happy to answer that question. The districts manage and handle the elections for the districts. The county is involved only to the extent of providing the property owner list from the assessor and the elector lists from the county clerk and recorder. The county clerk and recorder can coordinate the elections with the districts, but I don't think there's any county in the state that does that because they're already overworked and understaffed. And so the districts manage the elections on their own.
That's not what I was referring to, but
So our attorney, John Jamil, is.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, Trustee Waldo, I believe you're referencing the issue with the vacancies that were on the board. And that was actually a separate issue under the statute, and that was who had the authority to appoint to fill vacancies. And I would agree that the statute does need clarifying based on a strict reading. The statute only references the county as the appointing body. And so we went back and forth with counsel for the applicants as well as the county attorneys to resolve that at that point. The statute is still unclear, but at this point, I believe everyone is in agreement that functionally it would be the town board that would take any of that action in the future if that did arise again.
without straightening out the statutes.
We can certainly try, but that's a whole different ball of wax.
I'm gonna contact our state senator as soon as this session is over about that. Okay, and then the debt limit was $99 million. And somehow now, between 24 million on West Meadow and 85 million on the other three, that's 109 million. So where did that 10 million come from?
I mean, the $99 million is from 2004. A cost have increased
I
dramatically.
remember.
So what we have are current engineer estimates. That's what's referenced in the service plan. They're stamped by licensed engineers that review these areas and estimate what the cost would be today's numbers. Okay, so that's where the differential comes from. And it's purely related to inflation. And it's been a long time since 2004, so
It seems like
it's
it's not enough
understandable
for
that,
that.
well, I think the good news is a lot of the things that we've done already in West Meadow are finished and done. And, some of that was, we really started this project in 2006. I think Old Victory Road in Cousins Meadow was the first public infrastructure ever built. And then it went from there, and then it had an idle period where nothing happened. That's what really prompted the amendment request, which was the extension of time for the mill levy to be outstanding, and homeowners didn't like that. So this is what we got. But it purely is related to what the engineer's cost estimates are today for the remaining infrastructure. There's a lot of infrastructure here. big water systems, big water tanks. Water plant investments, there's a lot of stuff that has to be built for this. It's a pretty large project. That answer your question?
Isn't the same thing gonna happen to the 200 million before
I don't-
2048?
I won't be alive, I don't think. I think so, we kind of need to figure out a way to get things going a little faster.
And then the developer reimbursement agreement term limit is 20 years. 20 years from where? What?
20 years from the date it is entered into with the developer.
From the approval of this amendment, right? Or the debt is in.
From the date that the agreement is entered into. This is an additional requirement that's not currently in the existing service plan that the town had requested.
I didn't get that.
So the town requested that,
So,
so in order to form the tax issue, like you guys are looking at your downtown redevelopment. plan, And in order for you to go issue debt to make the improvements, you need a tax base. Okay, you can go do what's called dirt bonds, you wouldn't sell them today because of the real estate market, et cetera. Because there's no tax base there. So I think in the presentation I was in for the town, they explained the town could lend money to the district to help build the tax base that then would underwrite the debt that the district would issue for the public improvements. This is no different, and in my opinion, it's the best way to do these is the developers advance. They can do it, it's a developer reimbursement agreement. You build the tax base first. And in our current plan, there's no limit on how long we could lend money. There's a cap on the interest rate in the current service plan. But there's no limit to how long it could be out there. So one of the town's requests was to put a limit on how long the developer reimbursements could be outstanding, which was agreed to be, they asked for the 20 years. So theoretically, the developer can lend money to the district for a period of 20 years and then issue the bonds, which then have a cap of, was it 2048 to 2088? So you would have to issue the bonds by 2048. And they have to be, the mill levy would go away in 2080. Regardless of what repay, I mean, it's unlikely we get repaid everything that's ever put in from a public infrastructure perspective, but the best way to do it and the most cost-effective way for homeowners to get the benefit of every dollar is to build the tax base first. Otherwise, when you issue the bonds, you'll get cents on the dollars because there's no tax base to support repayment of the bonds. Does that make sense? So this was a.
So you're saying if we agreed to this tonight, you'd have 20 years
Max.
back. And that would leave. Okay, 5 years for the debt issuance deadline,
Right.
and then 40 more years for the maturity deadline.
It would be 20 years from the developer reimbursement agreement, which is separate from the service plan, right?
When
So-
when the property starts becoming developed, if it's just going to sit vacant, that 20-year deadline, that clock doesn't start. Once
So-
the developer starts lending money to the district, then it starts.
So maybe that could be clarified in your document. It just states that when that starts for each district.
I think it's pretty clear in the service plan now.
I don't know. But Eileen had that question, so, and you weren't quite sure, so. It's just a thought.
I don't have a problem changing the language, so we clarify that it's 20 years from the date the agreement is entered into. I'm comfortable with that language.
From the date of the developer reimbursement.
And I do believe that was the intent, when we were discussing that, adding that term, was that it is based on the effective date of the agreement itself. So it's the term of the agreement is limited to 20 years. So it can be entered into at any point following approval of the service plan. But that when you enter into that agreement, it's limited to a 20-year term.
Just a comment, I want to say that everybody in this room other than Evelyn, Sunny, Atlas, and Marston, will be over 100. By the time these dates come up.
Now, I might be lucky if I make it to 2048.
So we have to be thoughtful about this.
Okay, any more questions specifically for that? Because we still have a presentation coming up from our staff and council, so then we'll have more. We'll be able to ask questions specifically. So any more specifically for the.
Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees, Town Manager Brack. Thank you for your time. My name is John Camille. I'm an attorney with the law firm Lyons Gaddis in Longmont. And I was hired as special counsel to advise the town on the service plan amendment proposals. So the applicants just went through in detail kind of the overarching terms of the current proposals. So I don't want to belabor that point, but I want to touch on a few of the primary concerns for the board's consideration tonight, as well as kind of where we started and where we are today. So as was noted, these were first approved in 2004, and then again, the first amended restated consolidated service plan was approved in 2005. So kind of to clear up, some of those questions is that as of right now, all of the property that was discussed and was shown in those maps is covered by a metropolitan district. The one change that was most recent is the expansion of Buyers View to account for the kind of redistricting or reboundary for West Meadow to make it applicable only to the developed portion of the current West Meadow. And so now Buyers View is covering that whole area. But it is important to note that as we stand right now, there is a service plan in place. It's the first amended service plan of 2005, and then all the area in the map is covered by a metropolitan district. So as far as the initial proposals go, kind of the major thrust of the initial proposals was the separation of West Mountain. So as of right now, West Mountain is just a single district that covers that approximately 1,000-acre project area. And so the proposal was to split it out from the current service plan, have 5 separate districts to account for the phase development, and also have separate terms. The most notable likely that jumps out is the $200 million debt limit that would be specific to the West Mountain districts. Two of kind of the critical components of those initial proposals were that they removed those issuance and maturity deadlines, and also removed the 5 mil limitation on operations and maintenance. And as we talked about the initial proposals, what became clear, particularly from the resident standpoint, was the fact that there was developed area in West Meadow currently, and that a lot of the citizens were concerned that there were going to be some significant changes in the terms for their property that they bought into. So as the applicant stated, what we proposed back primarily was a separation of West Meadow, and they came up with a proposal to account for what you see today, which is West Meadow and covering the developed portions, GP North and GP South, which are areas that remain to be developed, and then the switch of the Buyers View parcel, as noted on that map. So kind of what that ends up accomplishing and what you have before you tonight, as far as the proposals go, is that the new West Meadow district, as proposed, again, only covers the developed property currently within that area. In all of the terms of the current service plan, the current applicable 2005 amended service plan would continue to apply to those properties within West Meadow. That primary change being that reduction to the $24 million debt limit. So as far as kind of the developed area goes, substantively speaking, the material terms of the service plan are not going to change for those current residents in that developed area. What ends up substantively changing between the initial proposals and the current proposal is the creation of these two newly proposed districts, which are GP North Meadow and GP South Meadow. And so that's now a separate service plan, similar to how West Mountain was divided out of the original service plan. So you end up now ultimately with three different service plans. We have West Meadow under the current 2005 amended service plan, GP North Meadow, GP South Meadow, and Byers View under its own new consolidated service plan, and then West Mountain, which is technically West Mountain Metropolitan District, and then West Mountain Metropolitan Districts numbers 2 through 5 will be under its own new consolidated service plan. And as we walk through, kind of the critical changes are fairly similar for the newly proposed consolidated service plans. The debt limit, as noted in the GP North, South, and Byers View, is at 85 million. That covers approximately 119 acres of the undeveloped property within the remainder of the current West Meadow, as reflected in that map with the color overlay. It also adds park and recreation services, which is not within the current 2005 amended service plan. It pushes out those issuance and maturity deadlines. So kind of one of the negotiation points was that we felt it was important to maintain those issuance and maturity deadlines in the service plan. So those were added back in, but on similar kind of interval as was provided in 2005 for the issuance in particular, which was 25 years out from approval. And kind of as a quick note on that, as was just discussed with the applicant, there is a period of kind of ramp up where you have to build up the tax base. So you have the developer that is actually putting the money into the development up front to actually build up some level of development until you get an assessed value that will support the actual bond issuance. So that's why you have kind of this period of time to actually help develop that. But you also have certainty with that issuance deadline, is that there is a date certain that those bonds have to be issued, or under the service plan, the district would lose that right. And ultimately would have to come back to the town board for another amendment if they wanted to extend those again through the same process we're doing this evening. Similarly, the aggregate mill levy ultimately stays the same as the current service plan, total of 55 mills, with 50 mills being for debt and 5 mills for operations and maintenance. In the newly proposed service plans, that debt limit is able to be adjusted for changes in the assessed value rates. As you all are likely well aware at this point, after the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment, property taxes and assessed values have been essentially a matter of debate at the legislature. So it's a little bit of a moving target, and particularly with regard to the debt limits, you want to ensure that when you enter into those debt obligations, you have sufficient revenue to actually pay the bonds, because default, of course, is a heavy risk there and can significantly impact the districts. So that adjustment was made and is consistent with newly proposed plans for metro districts in Colorado. And we also did, as they noted, add in that reimbursement agreement term. So the language of that was intended to limit the reimbursement agreement term itself. So the term of the agreement. So you could have multiple technically reimbursement agreements within any of these districts at any given time, because it's basically triggered by when the developer actually moves forward substantively with investing in the property. And what ends up happening is that you have an agreement between the developer and the district that says essentially, you're providing the upfront costs to fund the development actions, and that we will end up, or we at least the districts intend to issue bonds that will then repay you on certain terms. So those reimbursement agreement terms were limited to 20 years. And we also reiterated that 8% interest cap, which is simple interest, not compound. So moving into West Mountain, the terms, as I just went over, are substantively the same. The debt limit is set separately, and that's specific to the West Mountain districts at 200 million. And that's 1,019 acres of the undeveloped property, which is the same as the current West Mountain. It's ultimately just dividing it into 5 separate districts. And so as far as kind of what's gone on with the division of the developed property, as we understand it, there's about 26 million of kind of current investment in West Meadow primarily. About 25.2 of that is going to stay with the developed portion of West Meadow, of course, because that's where all of the money has gone in to actually put in the current infrastructure that's existing there. None of that is going to be allocated to GP North or GP South at this point. But the new consolidated service plan for West Mountain does apportion about $700,000 of that existing outstanding developer debt to the West Mountain districts. So there's a little bit of that nuance in that that's separate from the GP North, GP South. So overall, what we have here is that, from the initial proposals to the current proposals really is the response to the concerns of the citizens of West Meadow. Kind of the largest change really is the separation of West Meadow into now what you see as the 3 districts, so GP North, West Meadow, and GP South. And those will all be developed separately. As was noted, each district will have its own board. So as development occurs and you actually have property sold, then individuals will be eligible to get seated on those boards. And they can make any determinations and request changes, just like we're doing here tonight with the current plans. So moving forward, as far as the legal consideration, under the Special District Act, the town may take 3 primary actions at the hearing when you're considering a new service plan or a service plan amendment. And that is to approve with or without condition or modification, to disapprove, or to conditionally approve, subject to the submission of any additional information the Board of Trustees would either require or that somehow relates to the amendments, similarly kind of like a clarification point, anything like that we want to note for the record. Also, as the applicant stated, there are 4 primary statutory factors that you're really assessing when you're talking about the approval or disapproval or approval with conditions of the Metropolitan District Service Plan. And those are sufficient existing and projected need for organized service in the area, that there's essentially a lack of service in the area for the proposed district, that the proposed district can provide those services on an economical and sufficient basis, and that the area to be included in those proposed districts has or will have the financial ability to discharge the proposed indebtedness on a reasonable basis. So kind of those 4 primary statutory factors are really the crux of the consideration. And, as you work through those, as was pointed out by the applicant, and I think has been shown in the changes that have been made, the staff is comfortable at this point with a recommendation. And I can either go into that recommendation now, or I can pause for questions from the board before we work into the recommendation.
Board, do you have any specific questions right now?
Is this where I bring up impact fees?
It could be at the discretion of the mayor.
I'm concerned about the school and fire district impact fees. On the original annexation happened, the schools at least got an impact fee. And it doesn't have to be like a lump sum like that was done, but it could be per unit or something. I'm very concerned about that. I also would like to see the numbers on how the planned investment fees will finance the joint facility until we start receiving them, until the town starts receiving them. And when would that be?
So as far as the school district or fire district, those impact fees would be set by their boards as an independent action. You can certainly have the town, confirm that you have to work with the school districts or the fire districts, to work out the impact fees, but those are set by the separate legal entities that have the statutory authority to impose those fees. So those would be specific to the school district and the fire district, and those would come along similar to the plan investment fees for water and sewer when you actually have the development applications. That's the trigger for those to actually be assessed and calculated. based on the schedule that's applicable at the time the application is made.
But then the original document that was up front. And I would like it specified in this one. That that's going to happen.
So I think that potentially is a separate document. The service plans didn't address the impact fees that likely would be potentially the annexation agreement or the PDP that could have gone into that, because again, that's more of a development scope issue and would be triggered by the development phases, the active development and development applications, which would be separate again from the service plan and the metropolitan district boundaries. Ultimately, from the service plan perspective, what you're doing is you're kind of setting up the legal kind of taxing and jurisdictional authority boundaries for the district. So it's essentially the area where the district can exercise its statutory authority. So it doesn't approve or require any kind of development. Ultimately, it's just defining kind of the statutory jurisdiction of having the metropolitan district overlay a certain property. Ultimately, of course, the goal is that area then serves as the tax base, to finance the public improvements, but it does not have a bearing necessarily on the actual development that will go on within the district.
As long as I've been on the water wastewater committee and the joint facility operating committee, we hear all the time that our budget is in such bad shape because of the metro districts. We're not getting what we need to get to operate our plant. And so how is this going to be addressed?
So
I'd like to see numbers as to how this will work out.
So I think again, that would be primarily on the development side itself, when you actually have development applications. Certainly, I think that those conversations could be had, but really in the service plan, that's not really the context where you'd have those addressed. These aren't really even contemplating any kind of specific development. They can kind of project as part of their financial analysis, kind of what they intend to do. So I think certainly the town could look preemptively potentially at kind of where, if you have, this kind of development move forward, what would the planned investment fees be that could potentially come to the town? But ultimately, until you have that development application and you know firmly what's going to be developed, that's when you'll know both the amount and the timeline, when you receive that, what the connections would be for that particular development.
So we would have to go through this for every development.
Yes, this again is not a development approval or consideration. This is purely the consideration for the service plan and creating that kind of legal jurisdiction boundary where they can exercise their statutory authority. Any development will have to go through the regular town process. And that's actually reiterated in the service plans, both from kind of a broad perspective of development, but also compliance with town construction standards. And even the public infrastructure itself. So when you actually get to the point where you're putting in the water and sewer pipes, sidewalks, all of that's going to have to come before the town and comply with town requirements. So again, this really isn't considering any specific development action at this time. It's purely setting up the boundaries for the districts. And then, yes, you and anyone else that's lucky enough to be in your seat in the near term is going to get any of the applications when they actually want to break ground and actually, put in the infrastructure.
Any other board members?
Yeah. So at this point, based on the current terms of the service plan amendments and the new consolidated service plans, staff is comfortable recommending approval of the amendments and related intergovernmental agreements conditioned on the district's execution of the proposed IGAs at the district's first meeting following service plan approval. The board may also consider applying any additional relevant conditions for the approval based on the testimony of the hearing as permitted by state law. The approval of these service plan amendments does not impact the town's continuing authority over the development of the property covered by the amendments. I'm happy to address any questions on the recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have just a few comments.
Evening, trustees, county member, town attorney. It seems like there was some confusion at the beginning of this discussion, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on anything that might be confusing here. I know that I heard before the hearing that there might be some concern about how potential approval of this Metro District Service Plan Amendment could affect the litigation that we're involved in right now. So let me just kind of give a little bit of foundation and explain why it does not. So the litigation involves the 2003 annexation agreement and the 2005 PDD plan. The PDD plan was the 9-page map that showed all the development parcels. It showed 23W. It showed all of the development parcels around 23W. And the way that was laid out is those development parcels that lay within 23W are pliable, and you don't know what they're going to look like until an actual specific plan comes before you for approval. So that's why around Cousins Meadow, you have 23W that's kind of just a general shape on the PDD plan. And then you've got these bubbles all the way around it that were the development bubbles. And now, as you saw on some of these maps that were shown, they're defined where they've been approved. So that is defining the boundary of 23W. Now, if you go back to the original PDD and you look for 23W, it shows it, and it shows, in notes on it, generally, it's about 466 acres approximately. It can vary depending on what the developments ultimately end up looking like. But it also says that, and this is what we're litigating over right now. A portion is going to be put into conservation easement, being Cousins Meadow and Elk Creek Meadow. And that's what we're fighting about in the litigation. And those issues directly stem from just the annexation agreement and that 2005 PDD now, and how to interpret those. What we're talking about here tonight is totally unrelated and will be unaffected if you were to approve this service plan amendment. People are looking at the boundaries of these service plan districts, or these new districts that are proposed, and they're thinking, well, that's going to be the boundaries of where the development is. And that's simply not the case necessarily. I mean, it could end up being that, but we don't know until we get to the end and you guys approve those ultimate development pods. So like John said, like Clark said, all we're doing tonight is looking at establishing a taxing boundary. It has no bearing on what will ultimately be in Cousins Meadow conservation easement, Elk Creek conservation easement, or will it have any bearing on how the judge looks at the litigation down the road? So with that, if there's any questions, please ask me now. That's all I want to say.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Board want to take a quick 3-minute break,
Yeah, that's right.
and then we'll open up public comments section. We can
Yep.
do a
Timer.
quick break and we'll be right back.
Folks, we know the water fountain's not working, but there's a cooler of water over by the door. If anybody needs, please help yourselves.
They're gonna need more than 3 minutes.
You're gonna go ahead and continue on with the public hearing. We're now at the public comments. I'd like to go ahead and open the public comments section of it. So we'll start here in the building. So raise your hand. I'll address you. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you and we want to keep this on topic, so we're talking specifically about this district, this metro district. So anything outside of that, come back at our next meeting and type in at the open forum. So we want to keep this to specifics to what's on the agenda tonight. So and if you don't need to repeat, if you agree with something, you can come up and state your name, if you live in the town of Fraser or not, and no, I agree with all. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We do have a timer going, and we will definitely be cutting you off at 3 minute mark. So okay. We could actually bring, do we want to bring that microphone? You're gonna make it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We have to lend that first.
My name is Peggy Smith and I live at 1395 Pioneer Trail in the town of Fraser. So, in a perfect world, the town of Fraser and the developer would be negotiating Grand Park's Metro District simultaneously with the demolition of the unfinished yellow buildings, Grand Park's development rights that currently expire in 2028, the 466 acres of open space to be designated as a conservation easement that are currently subject to litigation, impact fees that will offset some of the effects of future development, and the affordable housing needs that were not met in the 2003 annexation agreement. In essence, an annexation agreement do-over. Unfortunately, it appears that we need to wait until 2028 for these outstanding issues and obligations to be met. It is my understanding that the developer has the right to request an amendment to the existing Metro District Service Plan, and the town must respond within a certain period of time. So it is incumbent on the community to be aware of how the amendment of the Grand Parks Metro District will impact the community at large. The questions that citizens should be asking are: number one, will Old Town Fraser property owners' taxes be used to support the extensive road system in Grand Park in any way? Or the developer is paying for things like a new snowplow or water and sewer line repairs. Two, although the town is not responsible for the debt of the Metro District, it does impact the town's ability to raise property taxes for future needed services. What are the cost impacts for our water and sanitation system by the additional development, where the developer only pays for the infrastructure to the main line, not the capacity increases that will be required to meet the additional demand? In other words, who is going to pay for an additional well to be drilled or the sanitation plant to be expanded to meet this increased demand? Three, with the addition of 2,796 residential housing units, 221,000 square feet of commercial space, and 751 lodging units, how will we go to the community at large to raise taxes for additional schools, the fire station? The town needs to negotiate impact fees. If it can't be done with the Metro District negotiation, can you commit to the community that it will be done in 2028 when the vesting rights end and the new annexation agreement is negotiated? Four, as stated in the service plan, the developer has the right to issue general obligation bonds no later than December 31st, 2048, with a maturity date of December 31st, 2088. The town should not allow debt be taken out by the Metro Districts to outlast the life of the funded asset, especially when the town is financially responsible for the maintenance of the public infrastructure. Limiting the debt service term needs to be a requirement of any negotiation. Rendezvous's Metro District will be paid off in 2028. Why should Grand Parks be extended to 2088? So those are my questions. I think I hit my practice. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you. I want to make sure I charge you. Breather. Yeah. Okay. I was there once for a different reason, but it's not fun. I'm Paula Stewart. I live at 87 Byers Street in Fraser.
The service plan submitted has several maps showing the future outlines of new boundaries for the new metro districts. These maps show proposed future development layouts and they conflict with one another. The board needs to require the developer to remove the future development plans to prevent any future suggestions that these plans were approved. The planning areas that were approved in the original 2003 annexation need to be added. This will help the board and planning commission make decisions when future planned development plans are submitted that they do not encroach on the 466 acres of open space and or conservation easement lands while we're in the process of litigation and the future vesting right negotiation in 2028. This is critical since without the benefit of the town planner, on March 22nd, the planning commission approved an FDP for Grand Park 5-1, planning area 10W and 11W. Unfortunately, these 72 lots are in 23W, not 10W, and 11W was represented by the developer. He's going to pass out 2003 planning district plan with 23W highlight. For those of you who are who approved this and the developer schematic for the metro district west of the railroad, I'm familiar with 23W. I just did, but okay. It's the 466 acres of open space that is currently being litigated. Judge Hope specifically stated in the injunction hearing that she trusted the town would not approve development plans that would encroach into the open space in question. Since the town board will have to final approval, the community at large is voicing our disapproval of the planning commission's decision and will be at the town board meeting to make sure the planning commission decision is overturned. We have the opportunity to learn from other communities who have more experience with metro districts. For example, Castle Rock has a collective of 37 metropolitan districts that have a debt totaling almost $1 billion, of which 48% is accrued interest. As a result, they've become a leader by requiring developers to use a model service plan that the town council has approved. Peggy has sent a copy to each of the trustees for your review. I believe that by enacting the model service plan prior to approving any service plan amendments should be incumbent on the board. The biggest takeaway from the Castle Rock model service plan is the regional mill levy, 5 mills payable to the town that reduces the developer's property tax mills from 50 mills to 45. The purpose of the 5 mills is to defray costs incurred by the town, as Peggy pointed out, for providing such services and improvements to the development. This mill levy would only be for Grand Park and will not increase the taxes for the rest of the citizens of Fraser. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I believe if we work together, we can help have Fraser be fiscally sustainable. Thank you.
Any other? Hearing the goal.
Hello, my name is Parks Thompson. I want to know, where is the meadow in these plans? Okay, because it's just saying that we can develop anywhere now. And at any time, basically, and we can move any boundary lines. That's what I'm getting. Also, how do you know the acres, but you don't? Another thing that I'd like to say is it's kind of ridiculous that he wants the town to approve this purple space without showing any sort of proposed construction plans. That seriously should be a red flag. Also, I would like to just agree with all the questions that Peggy put out there. Fire stations, plows, new elementary school. If we're gonna have this many new people, we can't, I mean, CDOT can't even hold their own roads, right? So we can't even get into town hardly. Also, I have a question for this guy.
So please direct that you're talking.
You come from, all right, why do we have somebody that is coming from a place of 100,000 residents in Longmont, overseeing a place that has very, very few right now, full-time residents, and that is kind of concerning to me as well. How big do you plan on going? It's not just this development, but other developments that are down the road. Also, the conservation easement, I personally would like to know. I want to see, is that going to happen or is it not? I think that's very important. Every day that I drove to the area at 10 years old, I was driven on the bus, whatever. I saw families of moose out there. I saw coyotes. I saw all kinds of animals, herds of elk, deer. I barely see that anymore. I'm afraid there's going to be a golf course there. Is there going to be a golf course? I'd like to know that. Where is that going? Also, I would just like to thank all of you for taking this spot because I know it's a very, very hard. It's a very hard job to do. So I appreciate all of you, every one of you. And I do appreciate development to an extent. I'm not anti-development at all. I want to know what the development is. Why is it being hidden? Is it being hidden? These are all questions that we need to ask for future children, youth that are going to be wanting to come here to train to ski. There's a lot of impact up here and we know that, so please be wary. Much love.
Anybody else here in the building? Once. Twice. Okay, online. Oh, Lyra?
Well, I'd like to go ahead and say something. Hi, my name is Lyra Kurtak. I live on 189 Mill Avenue, Fraser here. And I think kind of agreeing with Parks and Peggy and Paula. I think people are just concerned about what's true and what's not true. It seems like we hear one thing and it's different the next time we hear it. And we have put you guys in that place to make the decision for the public. And we think that you can do a good job at that. But it just seems like things are very shady, not answers that are coming through clearly. And I know that there's been issues with Clark and Cornerstone and other places he's developed. Hawaii is another one where he permitted for things and said he was going to do certain things and did more or took more land than he was supposed to. And also in Aspen, where he was trying to take over some land there for a lady's property. It was a 10-foot easement and took this lady to court and caused a big stink in her life. And I just really question when you have the same pattern over and over and over with different places. What is the truth? Are we getting the truth? Is the truth going to be what's really going to happen? Or is it just wool over our eyes so that we can get what we want? So I just question what's going to happen in the future. And it seems very muddled. So I think that everybody is wanting better answers for all of it, not just the tax issue for this evening and what is happening, but for all of it in the future, because it just seems like one thing happens, a different thing happens. One thing's agreed upon, something else happens. And I think that's the goal, is to make it very confusing and drag it through the system. So it's a mess all the time and there never really is an answer to the questions we're looking for. Thank you.
Is there anybody else here in the building? Just got Diane just walked in. This is the open, this is for public comments on specifically to this. If anybody else in the building has any comments, it's your time. Okay, now we're going to go online. So, and I'm going to use our clerks to help me manage this.
Okay. Yeah.
You're going to choose
Yep.
one of them.
Yeah.
Deborah Schulman, please unmute yourself. You're first.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Deborah Schulman, and we own a home in the Willows in the West Meadow Metro District, and I'm going to read my statement. Fraser is the tale of two developers. One worked constructively with the town, followed their service plan, provided amenities and open space, and will retire their debt service early. The other, from the beginning, refused to honor contracts and agreements, picks fights, is litigious against the towns of Winter Park and Fraser. Fraser is suing him over Cousins Meadow Conservation Easement Open Space, and he failed to develop according to the 2005 service plan. By failing to develop and abandoning development, he made $11 million of accrued interest profit from taxpayer money on an initial $14 million investment into infrastructure. That's how it works in Colorado. Now we have the example of 5 districts with no residents within Granby Ranch. Developer associated directors will vote to authorize up to $2 billion in increased taxes and bonding authority with interest as high as 14% and repayment exceeding $10 billion for each of the 5 districts. This is taxing at the highest possible level, not justified by actual infrastructure costs. No wonder so many developers are descending on Colorado, hungry for the obscene profits to be made off taxpayers. And this is where these current proposals are heading. I ask that the town of Fraser does not play ball in Mr. Lipscomb's court, reject these proposals and keep the original 2005 service plan until it can be amended so it's better for the rest of us. And I also ask that the town of Fraser require that future homeowners get full disclosure of buying into a metro district and the taxes at the beginning when they sign the contracts. And that after all this time, Mr. Lipscomb starts focusing on what he does best, which is building wonderful homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah. Okay. Edlin.
Adeline Fierro.
Hi, everybody. I'm Edlin Fierro. I reside in Tabernash currently, but I've been in the county since 2007. I have 2 businesses currently in Fraser, and basically, I agree with Parks, Deborah, everybody, Laura. It makes me nervous because I have seen the development from 2007 on. With the addition of the rec center, the bowling alley, which is awesome. But are any of these plans going to include what's next to the bowling alley? Because those are just sitting there forever. And it makes me nervous for new development, because if we can't even finish the projects that are openly there for everyone to see, what's it going to take to make sure that that gets done before we move on to any other projects? It's concerning for, the future of myself, my family, and especially my son, who is a year and a half, but here shortly, the way time flies, he's, going to start going to school. Infrastructures, our town is already overloaded during holiday peak seasons, and our infrastructure has a hard time supporting that. So I'm just concerned of where this is going when we can't even finish what we've already started. That's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, you're up next.
Lowered the hand too. Where did he go? Oh, there he is. Sorry.
There we go. Thank you. Hi, Joe Landon, Meadow Trail. First and foremost, thank you all for your public service. This is a very important job, and appreciate the contemplation, the research, and everything that goes into it, because it is very time consuming. I only have one question. Is earlier I thought in the meeting here early on, I thought I heard special counsel to the town for these special district matters comment that the town does in fact have the power and the authority to appoint property owners to fill vacant seats on these quasi-governmental entities, land districts, metro districts. It's my understanding that the town was previously advised that to not be the case, which caused a lot of confusion, lost time, and a farthering of corporate governance issue where the board seats remained unfilled. I would like to know, and obviously don't expect you to respond here, but I'd like to know that the town has a commitment to fill those vacant seats of governmental entities when they do exist, and when obviously appropriate and necessary. I hope that becomes a policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep. Connor Nelson.
How's it going? My name is Connor Nelson. I just want to say, where's the meadow? I'm wondering where the meadow is. If we can't even ask how many acres are in the white zone, and we don't know that answer, then why this new purple proposed area? Why are we going to do that if we can't even figure out how many acres are in the white zone? Does that mean the purple zone is going to go all over the acres? We can't figure that one out. Also, when's the yellow buildings coming down? We're going to build some more stuff, but we're not going to finish what we started. Those are some questions that I have. I agree with Parks. I agree with my mom, Peggy. I agree with Deborah, Edlin, and everybody else. So thank you.
Any more online?
No, I see no more hands. No.
Okay, so I wanted to thank everybody for the comments, their input. Really appreciate it. You know, the town relies on the community now and but give your input to the board so we can help make a decision. So we definitely appreciate this for showing up tonight. So we're going to go ahead and close the public comments portion of this. And we are now in what is the board's pleasure to move forward on this? Here's my question that we'd like to ask our attorneys. We did have the question that you guys were proposing being taken down, and hopefully we can get something put on those as well as we move forward. We will only be addressing specific to the metro district tonight. So the yellow buildings are off the topic tonight for this discussion. We have to keep it on topic for state statutes. Okay.
I still have questions about Buyer's View. There's never going to be any development there. So there really won't be a board there. But somehow all three districts are called Buyer's View. Buyer's View was divided into 3 districts. Right? I don't understand that.
Meadow and Buyer's View. The Shrunk West of Meadows just be the houses that exist now. Everything else became Buyer's View. Now they're splitting up Buyer's View into north, south, and Buyer's View.
And from what I
Right, but Clark said Buyer's View will never have development on it. But somehow, does the money still go through that district? And if it has no development, it really won't have a board.
Well, they are the property that they're on board, probably. If they did some kind of development, then they would be able to find a board. If they don't do development, there's nobody living there, there's no board.
Right.
So how they funnel their money through their corporation and their LLC is up to them. That's how this works out. So the reason, when I see it, it helps the people that already live in the houses. It's a benefit to them because they're not going to be strapped with all the steps that's going to come out.
Oh, I understand that,
Okay.
Arnell. I'm talking about the future.
I'm also talking to everybody else in the audience as well. There's a lot of misconceptions about how all this development works in PDD. The development rights don't change with this agreement that we're looking at tonight. The location of the open space doesn't change. The acreage of the open space doesn't change. The town has a minimum requirement for open space. The 466 acres is more than what is required by the. Where that 466 acres can be in all different places, it doesn't have to be just in the meadow. So, and so these districts that we're looking at tonight don't change any of the development. They don't change the surface of the earth at all. All they change is how people pay their tax. And how Clark is paid back, or Clark's company gets paid back for all the infrastructure, the roads, just like Rendezvous, just like Meadow Ridge, well, not like Meadow Ridge. Meadow actually paid all their own debt, right? They didn't get taxed back then. People have changed, they've got more sophisticated. So these districts actually help you, and with them getting paid back in taxes, it actually helps keep things cheaper. I know it sounds weird, prices of the houses that are in the neighborhoods, but it actually will help your houses be cheaper in the long run because you're spreading the debt out 20, 30, 40 years instead of paying it when you buy your house. That's the big thing. So breaking up the districts allows development to develop slower instead of doing what Rendezvous did, where they developed everything as fast as they could so that they get done. And a lot of people may not know this, but Clark and Rendezvous started together. Rendezvous has an 8 to 15-year jump on Grand Park. You look at when the separation came from the development site. Grand Park has always been behind, but they started with it. So breaking this into districts gives the developers more time to build out slower instead of rushing the development.
It still doesn't protect the meadow.
The only thing that's the meadow is our open space part.
The board protects the meadow. As long as we don't approve any building on it, they won't be building. I still want conservation, even if I'm wrong, but as long as we say no to the construction on the meadow, it will continue to not be built.
I realize that, and the board changes every 2 years. And I've seen things that have happened that have infringed on what previous boards have said they're gonna do.
Well, if you look at the 2003 PDD versus the 2005 PDD, the 2005 PDD, because these are the districts, right? 2005 PDD gave up the golf course in the meadow, which gave up the conservation. If you want the conservation easement over the meadow, well, then he may have the right to the golf course back. This would be part of the law.
Can you weigh in on? It seems like we're straying into our litigation. And I just want to get your take on, just so that the board, I'm trying to help protect the board.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, we've been talking about it just to put context and try to explain away the confusion here. And a lot of this confusion has come up because some boundaries have been outlined that sort of look like they're carving out what is supposed to go into conservation easement, but it's not any relationship to a conservation easement, what it will ultimately look like. These are taxing boundaries, not conservation easement boundaries. That's all yet to be determined. But bigger picture wise, to your question, as both sets of counsel have indicated, the statutory criteria that you guys are to evaluate tonight is very narrow. And it doesn't include resolution of the styrofoam buildings, resolution of the litigation, any other grievance that you may have with Grand Park or any of these other folks might have with Grand Park, albeit they may be legitimate grievances that need to be addressed at some point. Tonight, your focus needs to be not on the litigation, but on those factors that John laid out earlier. Is that?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I think I can do it too. The most important thing about tonight is to make sure that the current owners didn't get more taxes added to their bill that they already signed up. And by limiting the West Meadow district down to the houses and cutting off that top line at 24 million, I feel like that kind of covered things for the people who live here right now. Then the question is, do we want to see more building in this town? Do we want to see more building in Grand Park? You already improved it. This is gonna help facilitate that building. Of course, we still have the ability to say yes or no to every single piece of property that Clark wants to build on. Can't just build carte blanche. So this is just helping move the infrastructure along. That's all.
Another thing that is uncomfortable for me is why isn't Cousins Meadow in West Meadow? It's already developed as far as it's gonna be. So it's developed, right? West Meadow surrounds it. It has enough people to have a board. The rest don't. I would like to see it with West Meadow.
I think that's scarier, actually. Because right now, it's not going to be in the metro district at all. That white space is not part of the metro district. Right, so I feel like I don't know, I feel like you said, boards can change. What if?
Oh, they do.
What if the West Meadow board said, "Well, let's start building that." And then this board says, okay, that sounds good. It's just another entity.
Well, I don't think the West Meadow board can decide that.
Well, the board members have to live in the district that they're on. The
Yes.
board.
Yes.
So we can't have, there won't be like multiple board members serving on, like there won't be one on fire or West Meadow and then one on the other.
No, there could
We
be,
can't.
if you own property in both.
Only if you're
parts,
property.
you know, every single board. So, well, potentially not West Meadow.
So Clark could be on every board because he owns property in every.
Correct.
So along those lines, the West Meadow District Board election is next Tuesday. So I feel like we should make a decision. I feel like we should continue this and save our decision until after that election, and we have time to.
How does that election affect the taxes?
I don't know.
And being on the board doesn't change anything, the taxes.
I don't know, but it just seems like it's a good thing to do. I know that I'm not comfortable making a decision tonight. There's a lot of information tonight. There's a lot of questions to be answered. And it has to soak in for me. This is like I said, a big decision. For I guess most of those kids have gone, but they're the only ones that are gonna be here when this agreement is finalized.
Well, I'm not one kicking can down the road, and I don't see how this. Us deciding on these metro district tonight is gonna make any difference on who gets elected in the metro district. Or what they have to say.
That's, I'm talking about my comfort level.
No, I understand.
Any other comments? Can we address the questions specifically, or do you wanna? Are we prepared to do it, or specific to address it? Yes. If we can't, then we can probably keep it contention. Let me know.
Have an executive session.
Would it make sense to take a break? We can talk about it, show the questions. I did receive all the questions that were asked. In the public hearing. I can talk to our council. Which is not going to right now. We take a 5-minute break to discuss that. So, Kirk, is the board okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, so what I've heard is that, our attorneys will be answering questions that are specific to the Metro District. So they can, if you guys can just state the question, so that everybody knows.
Yeah, we'll repeat it. We're gonna go back and forth here a little bit, Mr. Mayor, because some of these questions I'm better suited to answer and some are better suited for John, and the first couple of John, so go ahead, John.
The first question that was taken down was, will Old Town's population's taxes be used to maintain roads, snowplows, etc.? So in the context of the town's mill levy, it will apply across the entire town boundaries. So as these developments are within the town, the town's mill levy will be applied to Grand Park, the same as anywhere else in the town. So as development occurs within any of these districts, the town will get the benefit of that increased assessed value and collect revenue from the districts, just like anywhere else in the town. Just like the current town process, the mill levies revenues aren't tracked from the location. So ultimately, the mill levy for the town will increase as development occurs, which will assist in offsetting the cost particular to this development. So ultimately, you can't really say with any degree of certainty where the dollars are actually going. It's all going to go into the town's revenue. But ultimately, that Grand Park will assist in offsetting the cost as development occurs, because that will increase the assessed value within the development area.
It's like Rendezvous did when they built their roads and then paying off their debt. Now Rendezvous roads are maintained by the town.
Yes.
Right, and the repairs, plowing, all that, everybody shares the same stuff. Right.
And all of the property owners within Rendezvous are paying that same town mill levy. So that revenue comes directly to the town, which is of course separate from any debt collection that's specific to the district or an operations and maintenance mill levy for the district that those residents would also be paying. So the town will collect its own revenue source as those assessed values increase.
So the mill levy is the same, comes out of their 50 mil portion that goes to the town.
No, as I understand it, I believe the town's current mill levy is 5.866. So that's applicable to any property within the town, and that's independent. Yeah.
But I believe that's part of their calculated 50.
No.
50 is on top of that.
It's layered over the top.
Yeah, it's similar to, for example, like the school district or a fire district would be on top of. So the total mill levy for the property would encompass any of those taxing jurisdictions that apply to mill levy. And so under the service plan specific to the districts, they have the ability to assess up to 50 mills for debt repayment. And in addition to that, 5 mills for operations and maintenance costs for the districts specifically. So those would be district revenues. So that would be the aggregate mill levy that we referenced, the total of 55 mills that each district potentially could assess. And that is separate from the town's mill levy, which applies to all property within the town.
And be clear, the assessment comes based on the value of the home, right? So if it's a $100,000 house or $10 million house, they get the same 5.8, 5.6, or 50% mill levy, correct?
Yes, the mill levy is always the same. It's the assessed value that changes. So of course, a higher value home will pay more in taxes on that 5 mills. So there's a difference in the amount, that's paid, but the mill levy is always the same. So the next question is, how does it impact the town's ability to raise taxes in the future to meet additional demand on services, additional wells, snowplows, et cetera? So the service plan, kind of as we just talked about, is separate. That's specific to the districts themselves and would not have any impact or limitation on the town's ability to seek an increase in the town's mill levy moving forward. So ultimately, that's always at the discretion ultimately of the town board. If you want to seek additional funding for the town, again, it would be broadly applied across all the town boundaries. So there's nothing in the service plan that would limit that ability. It's a separate and distinct consideration for the town. Certainly from the citizens' perspective, they have to consider what their existing mill levy will be. And whether or not to potentially support a proposed mill increase, but that's true of any local jurisdiction. And I think the key there is that there's no limitation on the town seeking an increase in the future as the board deems necessary.
And that does go to a vote anytime we go to increase the mill levy.
Absolutely. Any mill levy increase would have to be approved by the voters. So it would just be referred to the voters from the town.
So like the Fraser Valley Housing Partnership passed 2 mil last November. That's in addition to all its it's the give and take regarding value, providing civil services, building infrastructure.
So the next question was, how will we raise taxes for new schools, services? If impact fees can't be included now, can you guarantee that these fees will be included as impact fees in development agreements? Overall, kind of two different, distinct revenue sources there. One, of course, being taxes, which we kind of just touched on the town's ability, to choose to prefer a measure to increase taxes if they would like. Impact fees are separate. And again, generally speaking, are set by each local jurisdiction that has authority to do that. Can come in the form of school district, fire district, or the town. Primarily kind of the plant investment fee is kind of a similar type of impact fee that's assessed to cover the costs of new development. And my understanding is that at this point, there is at least kind of initial coverage of the impact fee topic in the current annexation agreement. So in that sense, there's already kind of an agreement in place that governs how impact fees will be handled. And ultimately, that's more of a active development issue. That kind of consideration would be triggered at the time of a development application, as we discussed in the earlier presentation. So it would not be impacted or limited in any way by the service plans. The next question was that the town should not allow debt to be taken out through 2088. And I think probably to initially clarify that point, that 2088 is the maturity deadline. So that's when all debt would have to be repaid by. And the issuance deadline is really the limitation for when they can be, new debt can be issued. So that's kind of the limit of when it could be added to the tax base for any given district. So ultimately, how that was determined is that generally speaking, most general obligation bonds are issued on a 30-year term. But ultimately, the statutory authority allows for up to 40 years, and that accounts for the ability to refund that debt, particularly if you can realize, cost savings over the life of a bond to refinance it, essentially, that you have that leeway. And so the relationship between the current issuance deadline and the maturity deadline is to allow issuance up to 2048 and allow for a bond that's issued in 2048 to have that full 40-year maturity, which ultimately gets to the marketability of those bonds and actually ensuring that they can be a good deal and not overly expensive, which of course goes into overall debt service repayment considerations.
Next question is probably my wheelhouse. It's encroachment on 488 acres with conservation easement being litigated. Talked about this a little bit earlier this evening. Just for some background, there's it's not 488 acres, it's actually 466 acres. It's designated as open space on the 2005 PDD. And there's a note on the prior PDD that talks about how within that 466 acres, which is also called 23W on both west side of the tracks and east side of the tracks, and includes the Cousins Meadow and Elk Creek Meadow, that those two conservation easements for those two meadows are to be put in place. But that does not include, that does not mean that the entire 466 23W property area is to be put into conservation easement. It just means that 466 acres approximately is to be open space, and within that 466 acres, Cousins Meadow and Elk Creek Meadow are to be in conservation easement. And as of this date, there has been no encroachment per se into the conservation easement, because that's yet to be determined.
The next question related to the Castle Rock model service plan, and that there's a high level of debt, within the metro districts within the Castle Rock area, and whether or not the town wants to follow this model. So a couple different points there. I think that as far as the model goes, I think similar to kind of the points that have been made about any kind of development application for any kind of parcel. Any proposed metropolitan district is going to have to come before the board with a proposed service plan and go through this exercise. So ultimately, again, it's going to be at the discretion of that board of trustees how that moves through. Certainly, moving forward, a model service plan can be a helpful policy determination to have in place. Provides for some degree of certainty and for the town to have kind of some say in what they would like to see moving forward. Ultimately, I'd say the model service plans still typically are subject to some amount of negotiation based on the unique circumstances of the proposed district. So it's not necessarily always set in stone. And really, I think that we were comfortable working from the current service plan, that is the 2005 First Amendment Service Plan, as the existing model for the town, as there kind of few other examples, and that's ultimately the current plan that's in place, and be able to review that and address the immediate concerns of the town board and the citizens with regard to how we can change that and ensure that it meets the needs within the town of Fraser. So ultimately, I don't think that it's necessary, to adopt a model prior to taking action on the current proposals. But certainly a model service plan moving forward is something that could be a helpful policy determination for the board to consider.
The next two questions I think I'll take. So the first part of this question, it's a multi-part question, is where is the meadow in these plans? So as we've talked about earlier, that there really doesn't have to be a designation of the meadow, because we're not defining the boundaries of a conservation easement by potentially approving this service plan. We're defining a taxing district boundary, not a conservation easement boundary, and not development boundaries. Then the next part of the question was, says we can develop anywhere. No, that's not true. There are development pods or bubbles, if you will, that are designated as development areas with specific entitlement, density entitlements for those areas. What those development bubbles ultimately end up looking like will be defined by the ultimate plan that's put forth by the developer and approved by the town. Generally, though, they need to stay within the parameters of that bubble. They can go in and out a little bit. They can vary a little bit on the acreage, and they're definitely not going to look like the bubble at the end of the day. The next part of the question was move lines. Yes, as part of the ultimate definition of those development parcels, the lines will be moved somewhat, but the conceptual requirements set forth in the PDD and the annexation agreement would require that generally they need to be in that area as much as possible where they're defined on the PDD map. My computer went dark. Can we approve these districts without development plans? Obviously, no. Everyone's going to have to come before Planning Commission and this board for final approval. Next question was, why is someone coming from 100,000 plus residents of Longmont overseeing development in our community? I think the question maybe was directed at John. We actually sought out John because he's a respected expert in metro districts. And as you can tell, this is a very complicated, very specialized area. And so we need his help and we appreciate his help. Next question is mine as well. Conservation easement, is that going to happen or not? Is there going to be a golf course? I'll address the first part of that one. Well, that's a open question, which is being litigated. Hopefully, there will be a conservation easement. Is there going to be a golf course? That's also an open question at this point. That's part of litigation. Next question is what's true and what's not? We hear different things. There have been issues with things that Clark has felt elsewhere. He has taken more land than he was supposed to in other places. If you have the same pattern with different places, what is the truth? I think I'll allow Clark to address that. Next question is failed to develop based on the 2005 service plan taxpayer liability. I'm not sure I understand that question. Do you, John?
I mean, I think based on the question, I think that the kind of two-part component there is that I think they kind of failed to develop suggests kind of the delay, in development from 2005 until now, as far as getting, substantive development going. Ultimately, though, that taxpayer liability component of that was the intent of dividing up current West Meadow into 3 separate districts, so that now the newly proposed West Meadow is not going to have the same extended liability as the newly created districts. It's going to be still under the 2005 amended service plan with the same limitations applicable to those current property owners. I think that was really, one of the primary concerns that we heard based on the initial proposals and what was ultimately addressed by creating that division in West Meadow, which now reflects the West Meadow being just the current developed area and 2 new districts, GP North and GP South Meadow, that are the remaining undeveloped property that will have the separate terms based on a new proposed service plan.
If we can't finish projects currently there, how are we going to trust that future projects will be developed? Current infrastructure already can't support holiday crowds. I think we'll defer to Clark on that one as well. I mean, that's his question. Can town appoint empty board seats when that becomes necessary? Should policy, as previously caused confusion, told town cannot appoint seats? I think, John, if you could kind of lead them through how that came about, what the statute said, and then why we came to the ultimate conclusion or resolution that the board would have the authority after all.
Yeah, so ultimately, it really was the result of, in my opinion, outdated statutory language in Title 32 related specifically to the ability to appoint vacancies on a special district board. That specific statute currently only makes reference to the county board of commissioners as the entity that has the ability to appoint vacancies. We went back and forth with the district's council, myself, and the county. From a practical standpoint, the county agreed that ultimately, since the districts were within the town boundaries, they would defer to the city, to the town to make those appointments if the board wanted to exercise that authority. So ultimately, the confusion was based on an application of that specific statutory language and ultimately not wanting to be perceived as stepping on the county's toes preemptively by making that determination independently. But ultimately, at this point, we've had that confirmation from the county that moving forward, they are comfortable. And ultimately, the district's council has also confirmed they are comfortable with the town board of trustees making those appointments in the future. So at this point, in my opinion, it's a resolved issue, and that would be the town board that would appoint any vacancies on any of these district boards in the future.
We still have to have volunteers to volunteer for the positions to appoint them. We just can't randomly appoint.
Yeah, and ultimately, it actually there is a somewhat of a process to it. Ultimately, really, it comes down to whether there's kind of a gap in the districts themselves appointing to fill a vacancy, because really the initial authority rests with the districts to appoint to fill a vacancy on the board. And so that's kind of the start of the process, is that ultimately the districts have control to say, are there any interested, current members, and go through the exercise, and it's a district board vote to actually fill that vacancy. And so really the town board only comes into it. In the statute, there's a 60-day time frame where if that vacancy is open for longer than 60 days, in this case, the town board could choose to exercise its authority to fill that vacancy. You also have to provide notice to the district that the town board is going to exercise that authority. And again, yes, you would have to actually seek willing applicants, to actually be interested in being appointed to fill the vacancies. So there's certainly a lot more process than just the town making the determination. And ultimately, the districts do have the ability in the first instance, certainly well within the first 60 days, to make the appointment themselves.
So can we memorialize that as in our regulations? Our practices for the town, because 10 years from now, if it happen again, no one would remember.
Yeah, no, I think that's
So that's something I think that town should look at.
Well-
Memorializing in our documents. Can't change our statutes, but it's not statutory.
We're looking at most of the homeowner association boards that have failed in Grand County because they don't have volunteers for the board. So that was my concern of who gets appointed. People in the district and people that are willing to get on the board. Because we all love people. Here. I know it's our big place, right? So,
and I related to that to clarify kind of the who can serve on a board that came up in the discussion is for a special district, you have to be registered to vote in Colorado and either reside in or own property in the district. So as long as you're registered to vote, you technically could, if you resided in one district and also own property in another, you could qualify to both vote in or sit on the board. So that's purely a statutory qualification as the definition of eligible elector for a special district.
So you wouldn't have to live in the town of Fraser, being on the board.
No, you would not. You could, again, as long as you're registered to vote within the state of Colorado, if you just own property in your individual capacity. So it can't be owned in an LLP or a trust or kind of like a corporate entity. It has to be in your individual capacity. But yes, if you own property in your individual capacity within a district and you're registered to vote in Colorado, then you could both vote or serve on the board in a special district.
Looks like the final question is, when are the yellow buildings coming down? As I said earlier, that may be a legitimate concern that needs to be addressed, but it's really not relevant to this hearing tonight.
So how about my question regarding the election? Will the election next Tuesday of these district members, board members, could those people have any impact on what we are voting on tonight or not? If they have a new board for West Meadow District, and there's the people on that board, would anything that they would say, do, meet about, have any impacts on what has been presented to us tonight?
Well, I think that ultimately, I mean, they could provide their input, but the current kind of status quo is that you have an approved presented consolidated service plan that encompasses the current West Meadow based on the boundary adjustments for West Meadow that occurred already. So in that sense, the boundary component, is already kind of a resolved, settled issue. And ultimately, I would say that that's outside of the statutory consideration for whether or not to approve the service plan. Ultimately, the service plan had to be approved. The service plan proposed amendments had to be approved by the current board. So ultimately, these are the kind of proposals in front of you. And so there's nothing that would limit the town's ability, just due to the fact that there is the election, next Tuesday. You have a legitimate proposal in front of you that could be considered based on that statutory consideration.
Thank you.
Is it okay for you to put question?
Sorry.
Is it okay if we, is it okay if we address that question as well?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, that one.
Thank you.
Okay, and Clark mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation, but the 3 district boards have met a total of 4 times in the last approximately 5 months and discussed at every meeting this process and our request to amend the service plan and create new service plans. And at the last 2 meetings, we have had a lot of public present, whether virtually or in person. And there was we didn't receive any questions or comments about this request. And it is based on that information, lack of information or lack of requests for information. I believe the boards voted to approve the service plan amendment and the new service plans, given that this is what the public, the property owners, the residents would like to have happen.
The boards have been. 2 of the boards only have Clark and Meredith.
That is correct for buyers and last month.
Your mic's not on.
And the 3rd board had 3 members at the meeting that I attended. Out of the 5.
That is true for one of the meetings. Yes.
Were all 5 there at a meeting?
At a meeting, yes, there has been all 5. That's enough meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board, any further questions? Comments, or motion?
I would like to make a motion to continue. I'm glad we have these answers, but it's still gonna take me a while for them to sink in and for me to think about it. Too much weighs on this to make a decision tonight. I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have, is Linda still on? Is Linda still on?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening. I just, I would agree. I would agree that it seems like, we're rushing into this and being sort of railroaded into making a decision that there's still a lot of outstanding questions, at least in my mind. This is a pretty serious decision that we'll be making. I think we need to, be thoughtful and think through it properly before we make that decision.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? So roll call.
Yeah. Eileen, yes.
Fisher, yes.
What up, Quinn? No.
Souls, yes.
Certified, yes.
Gregory, yes.
Yeah, I've never been one to rush. I think we have time on this, banner might go to the stage. Banner. So next is we have to so it needs to be continued. We need to continue to date within 30 days. That's my understanding is that.
Yeah.
So it will be put on a future board meeting, rather than hold a special or just a regular. And can somebody help me? One of our attorneys, we would be just voting next, we would not be opening the public hearing comment section back up. Is that correct? Is that
Ultimately, it would be a continuance of the public hearing. So ultimately, yeah, you would be able to open it back up for public comment for any additional comments at that time.
okay? Thank you.
Before we go.
No, we're not done yet.
No, before we. I just want to make a point. The last time we did an audit of parks employee housing, wasn't the head of the employee housing required to what he had developed? And with the 60 units in Golden Nova on Mills, it'll be ahead of the employee housing required to build based on what's developed, is not correct. So, for,
Don't forget the yellow.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't, should we have the town doc? Public for Demi?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. No, so,
Okay, 30 days.
Well, the only thing left on the agenda is there.
Jared.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thanks. Enjoy, are you in south or north? Lewis, or you're already late.
No, I'm here, north.
North, okay, that's right. Just enjoy it.
Sorry I couldn't be here. I'll be here the next time. Thank you.
A lot of good.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.